This is just your average murder mystery, albeit one that's drenched in the blood of horrific sea beasts that come out of the ocean once a year to wreak havoc and mayhem on humankind. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome and welcome back to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I have a review for you of A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the second book in the Anna and Din mystery series, also called The Shadow of the Leviathan. This is coming out on the 1st of April, 2025 by Del Rey, and I received a complimentary copy in exchange for an honest review. Look, this is a really fun, somewhat conventional murder mystery, albeit set in a fantasy world. So let's start with the mystery, because that's what you're here for. And if you're here because you want a good time, you want a good mystery, then this delivers 100%. Our main characters, Anna and Din, are a Sherlock and Watson type pairing, and they follow a lot of the tropes of that kind of pairing. They work for the Empire, and in this story, they are visiting a foreign country because one of their politicians or someone that works for the government has been murdered in a very typical locked room murder mystery style. You know, his body is found out in a swamp somewhere, but then they realize he'd actually been killed in his hotel room, even though his hotel room had been locked from the inside, all the windows and doors. And so that's where Anna and Din come in to investigate. And what I really liked about the story is right in the first chapter, you find out the how of how he was murdered and how this locked room mystery is solved. You just don't know the who or the why. And the rest of the story, as they are pursuing the who and the why, bodies start piling up. So there's more death, there's more destruction, and there's more mysteries that they're unlocking. Mysteries that go to the heart of the Empire, and mysteries that go to the heart of the royal court, of the country they're staying in. And so it just gets more convoluted and more complicated. And yet it's still focused on one central mystery, just a mystery that's kind of blossoming out of control. And that mystery was an enjoyable one. The clues that he seeds throughout the story, sometimes very subtle clues, sometimes more explicit, are really well done. They're well placed. Nothing is too egregious. And I will say that by the end, you know, when there's the big reveal, I was able to guess ahead of time who done it, right? But only just beforehand. And that's because he did a good job of giving you enough information to get you thinking, but not so much that he gave away the hand right in the beginning of the story. So it was very enjoyable in that way. He gave you enough to munch on, right? Enough to think about where you could try to stay one step ahead of our investigators. He never hid too much information from you, but he didn't give it to you all at once. So you never felt bored. There's always a sense of tension as a reader along with the characters. And then, of course, I will say that the actual resolution was a satisfying one, and who done it and how they done it and all these things were satisfying. And you know, the revelation scene, you have to have a big speech, right, where the main investigator lays out their findings for an audience and puts on a performance. And that performance here, there's first off a very meta level where she knows that it has to be a performance, that you have to reveal who the murderer is in a high fashion. So there's this meta aspect of understanding that this is part of the game. And that scene is wonderful. It's really well constructed, the way everyone is put together for that scene. I think it works well. And the way the reveals are laid out one at a time in that scene is just really magnificent. So if you're here for the mystery, then 2 thumbs up. This does a great job. Let's talk about the world and the characters, though. So it is a secondary fantasy world, very, very similar to our own. I would say like a pre-industrial revolution Western Europe. But there's one big difference, and the big difference is that there exist these giant beasts called Leviathan that come out of the ocean once a year, and when they come out of the ocean, they bring nothing but chaos and death and destruction with them. And it's been this way since time immemorial, since before history. And yet, at some time in the past, the ancient past, the people of a specific valley, the Valley of Khanum, discovered that they could take parts of these Leviathans' bodies, that they could use their blood, their marrow, their bone, all these different aspects of their bodies, and use them to modify their own human body so they could serve as protectors and actually fight against the Leviathan. And so they basically biohacked themselves, they bioengineered themselves to be defenders of their own. And eventually they realized that they had gone too far, that they had made themselves more than human. Instead of continually breeding more superhumans that were the equivalent of Leviathan, that no longer had the taste of humanity, what they did is they encouraged all the people of the Empire to only use these different powers as needed. So for instance, our main character, Din, he is augmented in such a way that he has a perfect memory, that he can remember everything. There are other characters who are augmented in such a way that they have incredible hearing or seeing or smell. And so there's different types of augmentation that come from using the bodies of these Leviathans in magical ways. But individual characters may only receive one type of augmentation, and there is a cost for it. So that is the fantasy element of this world. There's no magic, there's no fairy tale creatures. There is different flora and fauna than what we're used to, but nothing incredibly alien. The main thing is that they have figured out basically how to have biohack, both in terms of healing disease and healing illness. You can basically take a pill to fix broken bones, things like this. So in some ways, they are an advanced civilization. But in other ways, it is still pre-industrial revolution. They don't have cars. There isn't real electricity, though there are flameless lamps and so forth. But that is the fantastical elements of this world. And so the characters, some of them have these different abilities that they can biohack into themselves. Some of those augmentations are permanent, some are temporary, and that plays a role in the story. That world building was done almost entirely in the first novel. There isn't a huge extension of it in this novel. There is a little bit, and I'll talk about that later. But that is the world we're playing in. Our main characters are Anna and Din. Really, it's called an Anna and Din mystery, but really our main character is Din. He's the one we follow. The book is written in first-person point of view from his perspective. And Anna is the investigator he works for. And they work for like a special department within the Empire who investigate high-level deaths and high-level mysteries. So like I said, he is able to remember everything. And Anna has this preternatural ability to solve problems, basically. And you don't know how she's been augmented. At the end of the first novel, she hadn't revealed what augmentations she'd received. And there's still this big question about it. People are always questioning what kind of augmentations she has that allow her to do the things that she's so able to do. So that's why she is filling in your stereotype of a Holmes character, and he is your Watson character. He's new to the force. He's less than 2 years in. He's still green behind the ears, but he is good at his job. He has his doubts. He has his own demons that he's struggling with. Those are our two main characters. And again, it's written from the point of view of Din. So we see more of him. And there is the problem of Anna almost being too good at her job, which is a problem when you have any Sherlock Holmes type of character, that they're just too good at their job. They take away the fun. So the author has to construct ways to hamper them, to take away some of their abilities. So for instance, Anna always has to wear a blindfold because she's so sensitive that it's too much stimulation for all of her senses to be working at the same time. So she's almost always blindfolded. And like this, they have to find ways, they have to manufacture scenarios that they don't solve the problem right in the beginning. And that's fine. I think it's done well here. It's not clumsy. It all makes sense in the space of the story. But since you only have these two main characters, they're the only characters that come over from the first novel, then you get a whole host of secondary characters and ancillary characters. And what they do a good job of is making the main secondary character is basically a police chief, you could say. She's a warden. Her name is Malo. And she's a local in this country that they're visiting. She works for the Empire, but this country isn't part of the Empire yet. They have their own king. They have their own rules and regulations, but they have a treaty with the Empire because due to their location, their geography, the Leviathans don't come to their shores. So they never worry about the threat of these Leviathans. Whereas the other country, the mainland where the Empire exists, every rainy season, they have to still protect themselves against these Leviathans. Here in Yarrowdale, in the port city, they're able to have this facility built offshore where they take the bodies of the dead Leviathans and do their work on them, their scientific exploration of how they can use these bodies to develop reagents and medicines and grafts and cures and all of these kind of potions, essentially. And so it's critical that there's some relationship between the Empire and between Yarrowdale. But Yarrowdale does have a king. They have a long lineage of kings and ancestors that they cling to. Our main character is a woman from this area, but she works for the Empire. Her name is Malo. And so they do a great job of having her as a character to go against Din. So Din spends most of his time with her. You see both of the women in his life are both brass and vulgar, and they don't play by the rules. I think they're really wonderful characters, both Malo and Anna. They kind of exist in their own worlds, and they don't take any crap from anyone, whereas he is much more reserved. He's much more trepidatious. He is intellectual and smart and good at his job, but he isn't entirely confident about himself, where they both have confidence in spades. So whether it's Din and Anna working together or Din and Malo, they're good pairings, and they make for fun banter back and forth. And then there's a number of other secondary characters, and all of the characters feel fully realized. They feel like they exist in this world, whether it be in the world of this court or they be part of the Empire. They have interesting roles, jobs, backstories, and none of them are incredibly deep, right? Because they are only ancillary characters that are here for this one story. But there's enough to them that they don't feel like they're mere placeholders. They feel interesting, they feel exciting, and they help invest you into the story. So they make the story more intriguing and the mystery, something that you want to invest your time and energy in exploring because the characters are so colorful and fun. The writing and the plotting, I think, is really skillful. The writing is pretty straightforward. It isn't colorful at all, but it moves at a good pace, and the characters are colorful. So the characters sometimes do outrageous things, but the writing is pretty dry as it relates to it. So the writing itself, the narrative, which is, again, all coming from the first-person point of view of Din, is itself pretty tempered. but some of the characters are quite wild. And because of that, it is a joy to read, and it reads really, really quickly. You go quickly through the book, and the plotting is really nice. There's enough reveals throughout the book that you don't feel like everything is being held off for the end. You get little answers, though with every answer, it opens up a bigger mystery. So there's always tension throughout the book. And the plotting and the timing and the execution from one chapter to the next, I think is just really skillful. So it builds on itself. It keeps making this mystery bigger and bigger and bigger, giving you answers, giving you reveals, giving you some revelation throughout, but then really every time it gives you something, it takes more away. So you want to keep reading. And so I think the plotting and the writing were all really skillful. There are some interesting ideas that are explored in this book. I mean, one of the big ones is you're looking at this relationship between this royal court, this other country, and the empire. And there had been a deal that eventually this country would be absorbed by the empire. So there are these ideals of colonialism and imperialism and the benefits of those versus the benefits of an autocrat and having one king who's in charge of the whole land and a king who chooses who his next successor is going to be. It's clear through some of the customs of this country that there are some ways that they have this like old ancient history and art and skill, but they're backwards in other ways, such as they practice slavery or some version of slavery, which the empire obviously doesn't agree with. So there are these questions about what is more beneficial. Is it worth it for them to be colonized essentially and to be folded into the empire to have their individuality stamped out if part of their individuality is these old customs that don't have any place in modern day? And never really had any place, if we're being honest. So there is like a dichotomy there. I think that's an interesting thing to explore. I think it's a little muddled. I think that he could have done a better job of it. And he, I think, intentionally doesn't want to make it black and white. He wants to make it something that the characters struggle with, but because of that, it doesn't feel like there's enough to grab onto. So that is a little muddled. But it is there, and it does give you something to think about. And it is interesting when you think of this benevolent empire who historically has been ruled by these near godlike creatures who fashion their own godhood out of the parts of living monsters. What does it mean for an empire like that to exist? And what does it mean for that empire to then conquer or embrace or envelop other countries that are maybe less technologically advanced than they are? And so along with this, you have ideas of freedom and justice, free will. What does it mean to have devotion to your country? What does it mean to be patriotic? What does it mean to serve the state versus to serve the king versus to serve the empire? What do all these things mean? How do class and race work within this construct? How do outsiders join the empire? Are they ever going to be equals? So these are all ideas that are played with, these like kind of social concepts that I think is fun. I think that everything is a little muddled here. So I would have liked a little more chutzpah behind it. You know, if you're going to make a statement about something, I want it to be clear that you're making a statement, even if all you're doing is forcing us to think about it. So here, it just felt like a little bit abstract. But it was there, and along with that, you know, ideas of justice. What is appropriate justice? Do the ends justify the means? What does it take to develop society? Is it worth sacrificing human life if you believe you're going to be, what you're doing is going to be serving more people in the future? So these are all these kind of questions that are played with, and while I wasn't entirely satisfied with the way they were dealt with, I appreciated they were all there. They made this story more than just a simple mystery. They did elevate it a little bit because it gave you a lot to think about, even if it gave it only in little drips and drabs throughout. It was clearly there. It wasn't, you know, me putting it onto the story. The story clearly wants you to wrestle with some of these ideas. And so I had a great time with the story. I'd say the one place that it kind of falls short for me, and this is really going to be dependent on what you want out of the story, but the one place it falls short is that I would have liked more depth into our two main characters. I would have liked a greater inner journey with them. Or in lieu of that, I would have liked more expansive world building. Because so much of the world building and our understanding of our main characters really comes from the first novel, and you just inherit it in this novel. And it gets pushed out a little bit. Our characters do some inner work. There is some sort of inner journey, but it's very minimal, I'd say, compared to everything else going on. And the same with the world. You do visit this new country and you have these different ideas of rulership, and you get a sneak peek behind what it means to build the empire, about the facilities and the techniques that are needed in order to access the body parts of these Leviathans, which are used to, you know, advance all of humanity. So the world building itself is pushed a little bit, but not a lot. And you could say, well, maybe if we leave the world building static, then that creates a good opportunity for more character growth. Or if we leave the characters relatively static, that gives an opportunity for more world building. But the problem is, it felt like a half measure with both of them. There was a little bit of push and a little bit of growth in both areas, but not enough that was really satisfying to me. And If all you want is a mystery of the week, then you don't need that. Look at the dozens of books that Agatha Christie wrote, some of the classic mysteries. You don't have these deep inner journeys that are happening in all of them. You don't have expansive world building happening in every one. So if you're not looking for that, then there's no flaw here. There's nothing to miss. But especially after the first novel, which felt like it had such this riotous explosion of character development and of world building, I was really hoping that it would be expanded a little more than it is. And it feels like the story wants to expand. It feels like it doesn't want to be just a mystery of the week, but it wants to take that format and it wants to use that as its basis and to build in these ideas of exploring different themes, different sociological ideas, different political ideas, and different depths of character. So you can tell the story wants to do that. I just think it doesn't push quite enough in any of those areas to be fully satisfying. But again, your mileage may vary because the mystery at the heart of this story is really, really fun. The characters themselves are fun, both the primary characters as well as the ancillary characters. And the world, while it's very familiar, it has enough quirks to it that are interesting and exciting and colorful. So I can't really say any bad things about the story in that regard. I had a great time reading it. It is really fun. While I wanted it to be a little more than it is, I wasn't disappointed in the story itself. It did leave me wanting to spend more time with these characters and see what other mysteries they can solve, see whatever trouble they can get into. Part of the difficulty of a good mystery novel is that how do you top that in the next one? And so we'll see. I thought the mystery in the first novel was really fun and interesting, and this one was equally fun and interesting in a different environment, a different case. So we'll see if they can top it in the next one. How can you test your character's abilities every time and constantly make them expand is an interesting / difficult thing to do in this genre, especially if it's not just a mystery of the week, but some sort of iterative process where the characters are developing and growing. But I want to spend more time with them. I'm excited to spend more time with them in the future and see what other books can be included into this world and into this series. I think that's all I have to say though about this. I had a good time with it. I think you will too. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments, especially about murder mysteries. Do you like the kind of murder mystery where you can read them in any order? You don't have to worry about character growth or development or world building because every book stands alone? Or do you want a series where the characters grow and develop and the world expands with every book, which does lock you into having to read them in the publication order, but it adds a different type of richness? So what kind of mystery worlds and mystery novels do you enjoy reading? And do you have any suggestions that you think I would enjoy, considering that I really enjoyed this fantasy mystery novel and the previous one as well? And for that matter, have you read either of these? The first one being The Tainted Cup, this one being A Drop of Corruption, or any of Robert Jackson Bennett's other books? He's written a few other series, which I haven't read yet. I'd love to hear all of your ideas, thoughts, recommendations down below in the comments. But for now, I'll say thank you for spending some time with me today. I appreciate you. Please be kind to yourselves, take care of each other, and go slowly.